All right, welcome to Tea Talks. Julio, how are you?
Doing really well. Thank you so much for having me. It was a privilege to be here with you and what you're doing. So I really appreciate it.
And I appreciate what you're doing. So Julio Rodriguez is an exercise physiologist at Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. Is that in Miami?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's in Miami. We have several different satellites throughout Broward County as well. And yep, but mostly centered in Miami. Yep.
Excellent. So Julio, I'm going to give you the floor for you to tell us first a little bit more about your background, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions.
Perfect. Yeah, I appreciate it. So a little bit about myself. I got my master's in clinical exercise physiology, and I'll kind of dive deeper into what that actually means here coming up soon. And I also worked in primarily like cardiac rehab, pulmonary rehab, and oncology rehab. So it's, post-heart surgery, post with COPD, right? Patients who are very sick that we've previously heard, don't exercise, right?
Mhm.
And the beauty of oncology is that it's relatively new to the field, as well as exercise as a form of therapy is. So, but it's really advanced. So I've gotten the privilege to work with many patients. Particularly, I focus on cardio oncology. So, a lot of heart issues, arrhythmias, AFib, that can come from the chemotherapies, chemotoxicity. So I work with a lot of different patients, a lot of different kinds of cancers, brain cancers, pediatrics, leukemias, lymphomas, ovarian. You name it, I could probably say I might have worked with them. But it's been a privilege and an honor to work alongside many patients and helping them along their journey.
You're right. I've been hearing so much more about exercise and the role it's playing in recovery, in helping, to stem recurrence in cancer, especially. So when you say you work with patients, can you explain the role of an exercise physiologist, and in cancer care, how does that work, especially with cancer care? What is, when you say you work, do you show patients how to exercise? Do you have to give them a plan? What exactly do you do?
Yeah, so first, let me kind of dive a little bit deeper into what exercise physiology is. So I studied primarily how the body functions, right, in a healthy state, right, and then as well as how it works basically in an unhealthy state, right, and using exercise, how it functions within exercise. So what we see is that exercise functions in the body as medicine. So if somebody was to take a pill, right, exercise has a similar function. In fact, many different forms of medicine came from different things that we saw within exercise, right? So basically how it would look is that I focus on whatever the patients really need. So many patients go through chemo, radiation, or surgery, or the kind of the main three, or transplant, right? And we see a lot of different side effects. My goal is to help them manage the side effects and really bring about their quality of life. So I kind of focus on, a lot of the treatments kind of done for them. The doctor saying, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, right? Whereas my goal is to really help the patient take back control of their life and say, hey,
Right.
everyone's telling you to do this, but here's what you can actually do to feel better and see results and kind of feel like you have a little bit more control of where you're at. So yes, we do exercise during our sessions. We do a lot of kind of behavior change, modification, depending on the patient. If they exercise before, I focus a lot of the kind of the mindset of what it is to exercising during.
Right.
If we've never exercised, how can we start implementing a little bit of physical activity? How can we stop the sedentary time a little bit, and then slowly progressing us to a state of exercise, and then exercise training, which would be the topmost level per se or category. So yes, we do exercise. We'll do some stretching, some balance exercises. It really depends on the patient.
Do you feel like you have to do a lot of mind work? In other words, like changing the mindset, like a lot of mindset work, because you said there's some patients who were active before their illness, right? So exercise is not a concept. They were actually, exercisers, but then there are people who had never exercised before, and now you're feeling really ill and nasty and crappy. How do you get them to make that switch? I mean, what are you saying to them to make them, like, all right, I'm going to start lifting weights or get on a treadmill or on the bike? I mean, I would think that would be a bit of a challenge. I mean, how do you work around that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of patient provider trust that needs to be built before going to that step, right? Because anybody can say, "Hey, do this," and then we just hope the other person does it. But part of kind of the trust that I try to build with my patients is kind of seeing a diagnosis and thinking, okay, what would they be going through? And if
Mhm.
I can think, okay, what could they be going through? Whether it's maybe it's radiation to the mouth, it's a lot of mouth dryness, right? And I tell a patient, have you been experiencing a lot of mouth dryness? Or maybe it's with lymphomas, they experience a lot of cramping in their hands and feet in the mornings. And I say, have you experienced any of this? And they're like, yes, I have. Yes, yes. And I'm kind of saying things that they didn't even tell me. And it's almost
Yeah,
like, how did you know? Right. And it's
yeah.
like, because I have a lot of patients that have felt this, and here's what works for them. And I find that when I can kind of relate it to other patients as well, and I don't say names or anything like that, but say, hey, a lot of my patients, when they do this, they feel better, they experience this, they also want to experience that themselves. So I think that's one of the key things I try to focus on and make it realistically and maybe cross that bridge because I
Mhm.
am young, I am a male, right? So if I'm talking to
Yeah.
not, breast cancer, right? There's a couple of things that it's very different. Uh,
Yeah.
so if I can try to make that connection, the patients are more likely to trust and kind of maybe listen and go from there, really. Um,
I think when you what you were describing to me, I thought to myself, that sounds like almost like customized care because you're saying, hey, is your mouth dry? Then let me tell you what works for dry mouth. Is here hurting? Let me tell you what does work. So it's almost like you are another doctor, but one that's
Thank you.
meeting meeting them at their points of need, and that's going to build trust, especially when you can say, here's what other patients tried. So right away that patient is thinking, I'm not alone. Because one of the things when you're going through stuff, especially after a diagnosis, you think it's unique. It's just me having these rashes or these itches or mouth dryness or sweats or whatever the case may be. So by you identifying it and saying, is this happening? I think that's going to build that trust and that hope in your results. So I think I think I could see, even though you said you're young and you're male, I could people when they're ill, they don't care if you're young, you're male. It's like, do you have the answer? And then I think that's what you're demonstrating. So what are some specific ways, right, that exercise can help cancer patients? Because I've been hearing and I've been reading so much about the research nowadays. And like you said, it's kind of fairly new, I think, in the cancer space. And it just seems so counterintuitive, right? That I'm sick, I'm feeling weak. Why would I exercise? So what are you seeing? What are some of the ways that you see it helping?
So I'll kind of dive a little bit into the science part, the nerdy stuff, and then I'll go back into the
Yeah.
practical, the day to day, right? So part of the main reason why exercise, or one of the reasons that we're finding that exercise is very helpful, is because our body does very well in the state that the exercise produces. So I'll give you kind of an example, right? When we go on a brisk walk, if you're talking to somebody on the phone, and at a certain point in that brisk walk, you're going to start to breathe heavy, right? And the other person on the phone should be able to say, like, oh my gosh, are you exercising right now, right?
Mm.
Because they can hear your breathing. You're not running, you're still able to have a conversation. That's called a moderate level right there. And
Mhm.
in that moderate state, that's when cells are kind of working hard to reproduce healthy cells in a healthy environment. That environment within the body is actually very negative for the cancer because
Mhm.
it's something that came into your body, right? That's a mutation. So it's not supposed to be in it, but our body
Right.
functions very well with it, right? So it's kind of like putting, water into a car, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't, the body, the cancer doesn't need that state that it creates. It kind of built a level of toxicity or acid, right? Which is that soreness feeling. It's kind of like a acidic feeling, right? And that doesn't help the cancer. So it helps fight the cancer from that perspective, from a science
Okay.
perspective. And from a more practical way, right, it helps reduce the fatigue. So many patients, even on chemo days, even on a couple days after chemo, the fatigue hits them hard, and everyone's different. Some patients feel it 2 days or 3 days after. Some people feel it right away. But if they do at least a 10-minute walk, their fatigue comes down for
Mm.
the majority of the day. They're going to have to repeat it later on, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
go away, but it does get reduced. Someone from cancer fatigue, which affects many patients, right? It helps reduce the fatigue. It also helps fight against the muscle wasting, which can happen a lot of with the chemotherapies. So it's an aging effect within the body. So I talk to a lot of patients, and they could be 40 and they tell me, I feel like I'm 70, or maybe they're in their 20s and they're like, I feel like I'm 62. And that's that aging effect kicking in. So that's a lot of muscle wasting, tiredness, right? So it's your body ages faster, and as it ages, it deteriorates, kind of like a car. The more you use it, the more it deteriorates. Same exact thing with our bodies, right? But that exercise helps fight that. So it's still kind of deteriorating because we all do, but not as fast. So it helps preserve the muscle. It helps maintain your strength. It helps maintain the energy. But I think something that gets overlooked is the mental well-being.
Yeah.
At a very minimum, even if you don't feel anything else, at a bare minimum, the amount of stress it relieves, going outside, breathing fresh air, going on a walk, moving your body, giving yourself some confidence to move does wonders for the body and for the mind as well. So I think those are some practical ways.
Well, just listening to you, I'm like, gee, I didn't exercise today. I need to go out there, because everything that you're saying is true. And you mentioned about the fatigue as a side effect, and it just seems weird that I'm tired, I'm fatigued, yet the exercise will help me to feel better. Is there a science behind that? I mean, I don't know, and something you said earlier too, which honestly, I think is such a good point you've made about the conditions of our bodies, right? When we exercise is almost what we get when we take a pill, right? But of course, pill has other issues, but exercise is kind of pure. And one of the things I like to say to myself when I'm exercising and it's hard is, this will control my blood pressure. This is one less pill. This is like a, tamoxifen or whatever, this is a pill. And so that's why I was asking about the mindset, because the way how you're explaining it to me, I think, and I know it's still fairly new, but I could see the value of people like yourself right there when people are newly diagnosed or just going through radiation, that you guys should be like part and parcel of the package, that they say, okay, you have to have surgery, you have to have radiation, you have to have chemo, and you have to have exercise physiology. Like, it should just be a natural part of it now, because it's so hard with the other three without this piece. And there's so much of the wasting away of the muscles, like you said, and the mind and the stress and all these different things. So how receptive are people to your work?
Great question.
In general, yeah.
Great question. Great questions. Yeah, I think most patients are, because there are some studies on that, and most patients are receptive to exercise physiology in general. I think around 75%. Now, it doesn't become whether they're interested, it's a matter of when are they interested in the process. So, for example, some patients, as soon as they're diagnosed, I think 25% of them want to be referred to exercise physiology. The rest, it's too overwhelming, which is understandable, right?
Yeah.
At that time point. But if the nurse or the doctor refers them after a couple chemo sessions or a couple radiations, they're more likely to join then. Or maybe they go through the whole process, which has happened many times as well. Once they finish everything, then they want to start. It's best to start early. That's the best. However, if you're starting on later, you don't feel comfortable, and that's okay. That's still really good to just join in general, right? So it's a matter of when in the process patients are willing to engage, and some, are not willing to engage, and that's okay. That's their choice. But yeah.
Well, do you think the doctors, I might just talk about where you work. Just, do you think they sell the benefit of the exercise physiology, exercise programs good enough? Because, for example, I'm a survivor myself, and while I was introduced to integrative medicine during my treatment, I never heard about exercise at all. even with the integrative medicine, it was more about what we can and cannot eat, vegetables, nutrition. They said diet and nutrition, but not exercise. It's truly on this show on Tea Talks, I was interviewing Sammy Mansfield. She works in the space of exercise as well, and she brought that out. And but I'm a person who used to exercise before anyway. But she brought out the research, like you're saying, and I thought, gee, what a miss. Mm-hmm. Doctors aren't pushing this piece. So you work for Sylvester, you said, right? Comprehensive Cancer Center. Do you work only for them? And so you're part of the team there. So when patients go there, then they're introduced to you. So that 25% you'll get right off the bat, and then the 75% will trickle in, or the remaining will trickle in after treatment. They may come back to the center
Yeah. So the percentages was based on like a research study. Now at Sylvester, I get the privilege of working with several doctors who are very exercise heavy believers, right? That it's incredible. So we have a breast oncologist who's a big believer in exercise, and you'd think she'd do my job because she tells everyone to start exercising, right? So she makes my job easy. She just refers. She sees a patient on the hallway, hey, talk to Julio. Like that's who she is, which is fantastic. And then we work with a GYN oncologist as well, same exact way. A lot of other doctors are kind of hopping on board with the big hospital system. Not many doctors know. We try to get our services out as much. We do all that we can. We do events. I mean, it really, I think I'm going to flip it, not on the doctor, because I do think they get a lot of the blame, maybe indirectly, which I do believe there's part there. But I think it's more on the organization. I think Sylvester being NCI, which means, it's one of the very few who's actually certified as a National Cancer Institute, basically. They have to have referrals, exercise, nutrition, massage therapy, art therapy, music therapy for their cancer patients, right?
Oh, wow.
So I think it's actually on the Institute to really dive deep into helping the patients. I think the Institute sets a standard, the doctors just kind of follow along and trickle down. So I think if they created a system of referrals for the doctors, I think if the doctors knew more and they said, hey, this is a part of care in our hospital, right? Then more people would kind of join along as well.
Are there a lot of exercise physiologists like out there? For example, you work with an established place, with like I said, an institution, right? And a huge place. I'm thinking about the community doctor who's seeing cancer patients. Like, how do we get your message? How do we get the fact that people like yourself exist? No, I know you work with Sylvester, but where are the others like you that are independent, that are not attached to a hospital? I mean, how do we get that message across? Because so many people see these community doctors, right? But they're missing out on so much. Even established organizations don't really refer. So, like, what would be your advice to that community doctor? Or to us? How do we get that information out there to these doctors?
That's something that I've wrestled with at night a lot. I think of what's my role in this? How can I best help? Because I recognize that, Miami is only one location, right? I mean, I recognize that limitation. Part of my solution at night that I've come up with is doing meetings like this, having people like you really sharing that information to patients. I think we'd be surprised on how many patients actually look for resources outside of exercise. So what I mean by that is like they look at, F45, a lot of different Orange Theory, which is fantastic. That's great. But a lot of times they're not tailored for cancer patients. So they don't feel comfortable. It's not the best spot for contraindications to what they should and shouldn't be doing. So I don't think there's that much space, but on YouTube, there's a lot of great videos. I think conversations, meeting with more doctors, trying to get the name out there really makes a big difference and big impact.
Can you share, before we go, can you share some unique exercises I mean, maybe you can't demonstrate, but can you share some unique exercises that you recommend to your cancer patients? And does it differ based on the different cancers? So for example, we talked before, if it's a breast patient, do they get one type? If it's a pancreatic or, GU or something, do they get a different kind of exercise? And I know we talked a little bit about customization, but you were mentioning like, okay, a person may say, I'm going to go to Orange Theory and do my own stuff, or, whichever gym of their choice, but they're just doing stuff. They're just, doing random stuff. Is there like a series of exercise that you recommend? Or for example, we all think cardio, that's great, that's wonderful. But then I'm hearing, you got to lift weights because weightlifting does this other thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So there's a general plan I give that I'd say works for 90% of patients, right? And then we kind of structure into the individualized aspects, right? And I'd love to do maybe a class sometime or something like that. I think that'd be a ton of fun. I won't demonstrate them today, but to give you a general example, so a brisk walk, I think even a leisurely walk starting off is extremely important. So let's say post-surgery, particularly for GYN cancers, it's extremely important to go for a leisurely walk. That helps prevent a lot of blood clots, right? So leisurely walk, working up to a brisk walk, right? And you really want to target a heart rate, increasing your heart rate. That's the most important thing, right? And then from the cardio perspective, from the resistance exercise, I really try to focus on 3 movements that work basically 80% of your body, right? So it's nothing too crazy, right? It's sitting up or sitting down and standing up, right? Yep, sitting down and standing up, extremely important. And you can progress that, with a chair, without a chair, with some dumbbells close, with some dumbbells far away, right? You can progress that to make it harder. That's going to work a lot of the lower body, help prevent a lot of fall risks within patients. Your legs contain a lot of the muscle mass, so strengthening your legs, maintaining independence, right? The next one is working on your chest, your upper body, and I start off with a wall push-up. Many breast cancer survivors are very weary of doing the wall push-up, but as soon as they do 3 or 4, they're like, oh, wow, I can do this.
Can you explain that one, please? The wall push-up?
So it's basically you got your arms and hands on the wall. You got the palm outside of the shoulder, but in line with the shoulder. Okay. You're standing at a distance of your arm with your palm still on the wall. You're bringing your elbows out to the sides, your chest towards the wall, and your nose close to the wall. And then you're pushing away, right? Most patients, even breast cancer survivors, as long as they have range of motion, they're able to do that movement safely. The most important thing is just kind of being cleared with full range of motion after surgery. But other than that, should have no issue with that movement. Sometimes with an expander, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, so that's a little bit different as well. And then the third one, we really focus on kind of the accessories or the back, right? So if you're doing the biceps, bicep curl, doing the shoulders press, right? So kind of picking maybe a muscle that's really fatigued or really weak and focusing on that area. So maybe a lot of times it's the shoulder, right? So maybe doing movements up, making sure it's full range of motion, and then working without weights, and then working with some light weights.
Wow, I love it. I mean, I think I need to have you back, and maybe you could, I don't know, I mean, do a little, show us some more, because I think that's so important. And when they talk about the weightlifting part, right? Like whether it's the shoulder press or it's the wall press or the, up and down, what is the scientific proof, or what's the research saying about what does that do to your recurrence, for example? I mean, I know no one can guarantee anything, but why do they think that doing that exercise or those kinds of exercises, what is the scientific rationale behind that minimizing your recurrence?
Yeah, so kind of twofold answer to there's 2 sides to the coin here. So chemotherapy helps fight it, but it also at the flip side helps increase your risk. So right. So if you do chemo radiation, it helps fight it, but it does increase the risk of cancer, right? So when we combine exercise, cardio, and resistance in particularly, it's helping the chemos and the radiations do its job without so much of that second side effect of the toxicity behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it's kind of helping mitigate. It's that the side effects of the chemo, that's one aspect. And then the other side is that it helps rebuild your cells. It helps make them stronger. It helps rebuild, the powerhouse of the cell, mitochondria, right?
Right.
Those different side effects from exercise help improve our body to fight off the disease. Because our body's fighting toxins all day.
Right. Right.
We're
right.
just strengthening those cells to continue to do good.
Right. Julio, it's been amazing talking to you. So we like to end our show. It's called T Talks with Total Health. And the word T Talks is really a play on the T cells, which you talk about those cells, and the T cells we know fight cancer. So we like to end on a positive note, So I would like you to leave our audience with a message, an inspiration, a motivation, maybe about exercise, whatever jumps in your head. And that's how we want to end our show today. But really, you've been amazing. You've given me some more food for thought. And I have to figure out a way to get you back on. Maybe we're, I don't know, a day in the life or something. I don't know. You can show some more exercises. But it's been great having you. And you're doing important work. I just love to see more people like yourself, though, and I'd love to see what you do be a little bit more widespread. And I just make it rare. It's just rare pockets of people like yourself, and you're wondering what your mission is. And I think, like you said, being on shows like these, maybe doing your own thing on social media, and so doctors can hear and learn, and patients can demand this kind of referral. You know what I'm saying? I think when patients are informed as well, they'll seek it out as well. And so put some more demand on your service. So I'm just going to say that's my ending, just based on what I've learned today from you in the short 30 minutes. And so I'm going to have you end with your motivational or inspirational.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It has been a huge blessing just being on and talking with you. I really appreciate your passion for doing this. So it's incredible to see and talk and hear about your journey as well. So I do appreciate it. I think one thing I would leave a lot of patients and even providers with is that you'd be amazed at what your body can do during and after cancer. I've worked with patients and heard amazing stories. So one of my patients, her dream was to go to Machu Picchu and climb the stairs, and she did it. Wow. I have another patient who's a bodybuilder. I have another patient who their goal was to do a handstand because they were a gymnast, pick up their grandkids, improve their immunity so they can be with their grandkids. Exercise is a gateway to the quality of life that you desire, and chemo or therapies or whatever treatments, cancer cannot stop you from that. You have the privilege of doing that yourself, and you'd be amazed what you can do at the long run. So
wow, well said. A perfect ending. Well said. And so, all right, for those of you who are watching, even if you're not facing a chronic disease, right? Why wait? You don't want to wait on that. From what we're learning today, having that exercise regimen is so important. But also, if you are unfortunately in that group that you do have a disease, well, it's not too late for you to start. And as Julio said, it can improve your quality of life so much. So Julio, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and thank you for being on our show.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.